said his story.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Good. Thanks for hanging around. My name is Jim Schaefer. I'm the investigations editor at the Free Press. I've never done an alien life investigation, although I have interviewed a man who swears he saw an alien encounter in western Michigan that the government wrote off as swamp gas. I don't know if you remember this. I interviewed one of the main witnesses for a column that I write. Let me introduce our panel here. Thank you for hanging around. On the end there, we have Mr. George Knapp, who is a seasoned investigative journalist and producer of the film. Next to him, we have Mr. Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell. This is the director of the film. Mr. Bob Lazar needs no introduction to this audience, right? And his wife, Joy White. How about another round of applause for the film? I would like to know who we're talking to first. So, if you don't mind, by applause, if you don't mind sharing, who believes that there might be something out there besides just the human race? Any doubters out there? Okay, there's got to be a few. I appreciate your honesty. Mr. Lazar, you are extremely well known in this community, yet you've made very few appearances and talks over the years. I would just like to ask you up front, why you don't do more? I understand you've had some trouble with harassment and things over the years. Thank you for coming out tonight, by the way. We really appreciate it. But can you tell us a little bit why? A little bit more about why? How's that? There we go. Perfect.
I'm just really not, this isn't about making money, selling tapes, or anything along those lines. It's just, the only reason that I allowed Jeremy to make this movie was because there was so much disinformation spread around the internet. I mean, there's plenty of people on Facebook pretending to be me, answering questions. There's
They're imposters?
Oh, plenty of them, to the point, and you know, every time you take an inaccuracy off of Wikipedia, somebody else writes something silly on there, and there's just so much false information. I just wanted to get something down on record that, you know, was reality. But I'm not interested in, you know, doing a bunch of lectures or running around the country. The tape should do that itself.
Excuse my ignorance, but you've never written a book either.
There is a book. I haven't written a book, no, but I have helped a writer get an autobiography together. So what's going to happen with that in the future remains to be seen. Again, it's just
it hasn't been published yet.
No.
So you've never profited off of your story.
No, I think the people that profit off of it are the ones, to me, you inherently can't trust. So, yeah, taking money for any of this isn't acceptable. I don't make money off the film, and I don't sell anything. The idea is to get the information out. It's not to turn this into a business.
Sure. By the way, we will try to save time for some audience questions as well. I'm not going to be the only one asking for information here. Just another quick one that I've got to get off the top of my head. You talked about insurance as what made you come forward in the first place. But also you mentioned the withholding of this technology that you thought could transform the world, basically. Even more so almost than the knowledge that there's another form of life out there. The technology struck you. Why did you get to that point? What was it about your job that you just couldn't keep quiet?
That is really a long story. It wasn't that I just couldn't keep anything quiet and decided to say something. There's a whole chain of events that occurred and brought me to that point, and that's really too lengthy to get into now.
Okay, but that goes to some of the harassment and things that or
Yeah,
bad treatment on the job, the yelling and things that were referenced.
Right, I mean,
You
you know.
mentioned there were threats to your family.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, to maintain a high security clearance, you have to have not just no connections to foreign governments, you also have to have a stable home life. And at the time, I was going back and forth to the secret location at Groom Lake, late at night, at weird hours, whenever they called, and they decided to do some work out there. Now, I kept with the program, I kept things quiet even to my wife. Well, as time went on, my wife began to think that I was having an affair. And I had given permission to have the phone monitored. So my wife began to have an affair. And they were the first to know about this. So they began to worry that there's going to be some turbulence in this guy's life, and we don't know how stable he's going to be. Again, it's a long, involved story, but that's what started things.
That helps, that sheds some light on the situation. As a journalist, I also have to ask you, and I'm sure Jeremy and George have both discussed this with you, how many other people worked where you work?
22.
That's it? That's it. Why are there no other Bob Lazars? Where are they?
I don't know. I didn't set a good example coming out, so.
But you know their names, I presume.
Oh,
you ever asked them to back me up? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, at one time I knew them all, but I didn't know their names. Yeah.
But they never came forward. You're the only one.
No, we really tried to find some of them. I mean, it's been a long time now, but.
All right. Jeremy, can you explain how you got this man to talk when so many others failed?
Well, there's nothing like a good challenge, and as you saw in the film, that was, my films are exactly like you see them. I'm not making anything up, I'm showing you how I experience it through my eyes. You saw in the first real scene, George Knapp challenged me. He says, look, you gotta talk to Bob Lazar. I don't know if he'll talk to you. Basically, you gotta be the luckiest guy in the world, and maybe he'll talk to you. So I accepted the challenge. And, then kind of life just brought us together. I guess we were in each other's orbits in a way. And, they had a 20-year, 25-year relationship at that point. So I got to meet Bob, and he let me turn on the camera, which, was amazing. So the world got 3 more minutes of Bob Lazar. And as a fan of wanting to know the story, actually just wanting to know the truth, that was the cool moment. So, how I got him to talk is you have to be patient, and you put the camera on, you film 2 hours, and then he'll tell you something that just blows your mind. You have to wait, because Bob this is not where he's come from. He doesn't like doing this. He told his story. He feels like he set the record straight and untied the knot, starting with George, that 30 years ago. But clearly the public wants to know more. I think that's why we're here. Yeah, hell yeah.
Jeremy, the FBI raid is spectacular for your film. Were you worried that it might derail the film? Did Bob express serious concern that what you guys were doing was dredging up things that got him in trouble so many years ago?
I'm so glad I never have thought the FBI raid was spectacular for my film. I literally have never thought that. My mom thought that. She's like, I was worried about Bob. I mean, look, it's so funny. You see something on the screen, or you hear it, your mind saying, oh, I believe that. There's people that didn't believe that FBI raid happened. I had to, literally post more photos of it. No, I was terrified for Bob. George told me something like that was going to happen. I felt like I was harming a friend, by filming him. It fucking sucked. Whatever happened, it upturned Bob's life again. And don't pin it on me, I'm just saying. It happened, and there's a lot to that. But no, this is a real story. This is Joy's life. This is Bob's life. This shit happened. And whatever you believe about it, sure, in the movie it's dramatic, and I think that's great. Put an exclamation point on the fact it happened. Great. Because now people can kind of start to see it in the world, in the weird world that has surrounded Bob in his life and George in his life because of Bob. You get to see that as a viewer. That's the only way I can say it. It's an unfortunate thing, and we want to know more about it. We're trying to get the warrant for what happened. We're trying to understand it more. So, right? Second, right?
How much time did you spend with them shooting?
With these guys? Well, it's over years. I mean, that first shot of George was in 2012, first shot, and so it was over all that time, and then I'd come out and correspond. Look, to know the truth, you got to spend time. To make a movie like this, I go live with them for 6-7 days at a time. That was awesome. I get to see who they are. That's what I want to show you. That's what I want to show all of you. Was who Bob is. Whether you believe him or not, it's almost irrelevant. But at least now you have some information that shows you who he is. It's a big start of the story. Remember, George did put his neck on the line as a journalist to tell the story. It wasn't because he didn't grill Bob and try to find out the truth. He did that, and Bob passed every polygraph test. Put him in front of people that worked at Area 51. He knew everything. So Bob has been vetted. George doesn't care. I don't care anymore. Bob has never cared. If people believe him. That's not why he came forward. He's reporting his story to you. Take it or leave it. And as Bob will tell you, if you don't believe him, pass it on. It makes his life better. But I think George is better to answer that than me, because George has been doing this, when I was not even have a camera,
Perfect segue. I was going to ask George, you broke the story 30 years ago. You're still a working journalist. You've done many important investigations over the years. You won a Peabody Award, a Murrow Award. These are the biggest TV journalism awards you can win. Yet you stake your reputation on an investigative story into UFOs. Why?
Well, it was, we knew going in, my news director, Bob Stonewall, and I, after that Dennis interview, and the phone was ringing off the hook, we knew that this touched the pulse of the public in a way that really had not occurred to us before. We knew two things. One, we knew it was risky for my reputation because of the wackiness of UFOs, the fact that it's a tabloid topic, that it's not taken seriously by mainstream journalists, at least it hadn't been for a long time. We knew it was risky not only to my reputation, but to the reputation of the TV station, that this could leave a scar, it could blow up in our face, it could leave a scar that would affect the public's perception of KLAS forever. But we also knew a second thing, and that was that it was important. That if it turned out to be true, it was the biggest story ever. My news director, Bob, and I walked out of our first meeting with Bob. We had put him through his paces, grilled him, asking him where he'd gone to school and experiences and about his credit and everything. And we walked out and looked at each other and go, this is true. This is a hell of a story. It's the biggest story. It changes everything. If it's true, it changes everything. Our perception of ourselves, our human history, the economic aspects that Bob talks about in Jeremy's film, where we are in the pecking order, our place in the universe, our place in the food chain. So we knew it was risky, but we knew it was important, and we figured it was worth taking the risk.
What kind of grief did you get from your fellow journalists over the years?
It's never stopped. I mean, that's, there's two groups of people that hated it. The poobahs of ufology, for whom this story, it sidetracked them, it went around them. They are the arbiters of what is truth in the UFO world, which is hilarious if you think about it. Because 95% of UFO sightings to begin with are misidentifications, honest mistakes. It's the other 5% that are important. But the crazy stories that come out in the UFO world that are arbitrated by a certain self-appointed people, they decide which stories are credible, which ones are not, in a world that is basically made up to begin with, and they hate it. My fellow journalists hated it even more. And they pilloried me. I mean, the radio DJs they run out of Belch Barb and fart jokes. They would tee off on me in the mornings. They'd make up songs and poems, and the newspaper columnists would had a pretty good time, fun at my expense. There was 3 editorial cartoons in the state's largest newspaper, me with a butterfly net chasing a flying saucer, and there was another one, the Marshmallow Head Chronicles, with alien hitmen had come to Earth to shoot me, and then there was a column about, I had done a series about alien abductions, and the headline was "Kidnapped by Aliens," and they dubbed me a Grand Mullah in the Church of Cosmic Proctology. And there was another one where the TV writer said that people were rushing home at night to see my TV stories about UFOs, not because they cared about aliens, but because they wanted to be there when I went old goose loony on the air. It continues. Any story I do where I come up against somebody on any issue, they remind folks that I'm the UFO reporter. I don't care. I'm not thin-skinned about it, but it occurred to me that the people making those jokes, it's a lot easier to joke about it than to go out there and do the work, to look into Bob's background, to sit out there in the desert night after night, to see flying saucers, to dodge the security guards, to dig into dusty old records and archives. It's hard work. It's a lot easier to make fun of it.
I was entranced by the documents that you found to, oppose the official lines from the institutions where he either went to school or worked. I thought that was pretty compelling evidence.
One other thing that didn't make the film is during the time when Bob was in court, we had a congressman that was helping us. Senator Reed, by the way, was also helping us this time. And Congressman Bill Bray had requested records on Bob. And the FBI actually responded, which they always told me they had nothing on him, as all the other agencies did as well. I knew they were mine, but the FBI told the congressman, you don't have a need to know. They didn't say there are no records. They said, you as a member of Congress don't have a need to know what we have on Bob Lazar.
Wow. Jeremy,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I wanted to say one last thing, which is, it's so typical when you hear something that's outside of your scope of reality to separate yourself from it immediately and make a judgment and say it's true or it's not true. Well, the honest answer is you don't have enough information to make that decision. That's the honest information. You don't even have that now. It's a matter of faith ultimately. But, belief is not created equal. There's belief based on information you have that is correct, and belief that you have on information that is incorrect. But you'll believe it the same no matter what. So I think a movie like this, the hope is that we untangle some of the mess that has been created by other people over all these years. And then it's up to you. It's up to you to deal with it. Bob is just telling his story. He doesn't need everybody else here supporting him. He'll tell you his story if you ask him. This is a way to reach people. This is one way to reach people. And I think it succeeded in that way. Hopefully it was beautiful and it was fun and a little bit funny. If you get the bonus materials, there's like 2.5 hours of bonus materials, by the way. If you get that, you see Bob shoot me with a laser gun. It's funny. You get to see like actual real life stuff because this is real life. This is going on. So I just want to say that, I guess my thing sitting here is we just watched a film about people that I care about. And before just rushing to judge either yes or no, take time, decide for yourself, react. Otherwise somebody else is going to decide for you.
Speaking of the deleted scenes, I was able to see some of them, thank you. He didn't actually shoot you, right? He shot the wall. Oh, you didn't show me that one, okay. He's got a laser that'll start your ball on fire. But I also saw a nice clip of you, Joy, talking about Bob for 5 straight minutes while you were both apparently making either margaritas or ceviche. Okay, nice. I would just like to know what it's been like. You've been married 17 years? Is that almost 20.
Almost 20.
What's it been like living with this legend and at the same time painting, I guess?
It's been a challenge, but I don't look at him as a legend. And that's all he's ever been. When I met him, I had no idea who he was. He was just a nice man that was interested in what I had to say and was polite and seemed really genuine, honest. So.
When did he break out the UFO story on you?
People around me, a mutual friend introduced us after months of begging us to meet each other. Finally we gave in, and they said, oh, he's this scientist. I said, I don't care what he is, as long as he's a nice person, I want to meet him. So we did, and it was quite embarrassing. His car had broken down that day. It was hot in Vegas, sweaty Louisiana, all hot, and know you were not, but we just kind of hit it off and kind of gradually went from there, went to dinner, and he met my horses, which was the second good thing about him. He hated Vegas, like horses, and he was nice, so he had a third chance.
So you knew the UFO story before you met him, or I gotta know when he told you?
I had no idea.
First date, second date,
No, we
anniversary?
No, we just never really sit around and talk about UFOs. I mean,
Okay.
we just don't. I had an experience in northern Michigan when I was younger, so I've always thought there was a chance that there was kind of a light source out there. So to me, it was like, okay, he did this, no big deal. Everybody does something for a living, and that was kind of what it is.
Why are you two in Michigan?
Family.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, we're glad you're here. Who wants to ask some questions from the audience? I think we have is there a microphone out there anywhere? Anybody see it? You may just have to shout.
If there's been so much reverse engineering, things like fiber optics or other stuff, what's kept the propulsion from being fused? Because it seems like there's so many advantages in terms of defense, flight, travel, and I mean, it seems like there's all upsides, no downside. Is it because the technology is so advanced and we haven't been able to make?
Yeah, exactly. The technology is just so advanced. I don't really even know how to give you a reasonable analogy. I guess it would be like giving an iPhone to a chimpanzee, which I think is what Jeremy mentioned earlier today. But we can't duplicate anything. I mean, they're all the components of the craft. There's no wiring. There's no connections between them. You can take half of them out and it still operates. It really is amazing the way the thing works. It's borderline magic. Now, take an iPhone back to Victoria times too, of course, that looks like magic too. And they can't even make the plastic case that surrounds it, much less understand what all the little tiny chips do inside, which just look like pieces of slate to them. But that's exactly where we are. We can kind of observe and document how some of the things work and how they change if we do certain things. But as of when I was in the project, in the late 80s and early 90s, we have a chance of duplicating anything. So that's where it's, I don't know what happened in the 30 years since then, but I don't know, there would have to be some monumental discovery of some kind just to move forward at all.
Good.
Two parts. First, how long did you work on it for? And second, and most importantly, how did it end? And if you quit, why on earth did you ever quit a job like that?
April of '88 was when I started, and 89, March of '89, something like that. I didn't quit. Again, it had to do with, they began to question my clearance, and then they stopped calling me out there. After that, I started having agents show up at my house and just park outside and watch. And in fact, one of the guys that you saw, or the friend of Mario in the film, used to drive around with me, and we were followed everywhere. And every time we stopped, the car would be searched. It got to a point where now I became afraid that they gave me all this information and they were beginning to doubt whether or not I was safe with it. So I began to be concerned that I just might disappear. So I took my closest friends, and that's when I went out into the desert. I had all the test time to the craft. So I took friends out with me and I said, we need to go out here and we need to show you what I'm working on. We hid out in the desert. I allowed them to see what was going on, and they said, should anything ever happen, this is what I was doing. And things kind of progressed from there, and one of the people I knew said, look, you should probably talk to this guy, George Knapp, and that's pretty much in a nutshell how all that started.
Are your friends still around?
Yeah.
Did they not want to be interviewed, Jeremy?
I've talked with so many people that would have been in the film. There was a limited time you have, and an hour and a half to make a film. There are also people that couldn't be in the film. They wanted to. Like when I found the guy that George, exposed, when Bob told him, I mean, this guy that did the security clearance, he was on the job. He couldn't talk to George back then. He was eating a steak, saw it on the news, dropped his fork. He told me the story. I found him after 30 years. He couldn't go on camera. It was yes, no, yes, no. Look, there are so many people that could testify to Bob telling you the truth. There's not a single friend of his. From all of that time, not a single person who's come forward and says, I was there, I knew Bob, and it's BS. Not a single person. In fact, it's the opposite. So is my movie about just trying to prove to you that Bob's telling you the truth? No. My movie is to weaponize your curiosity so you decide for yourself. I could sit here and give you an hour-long lecture, how did Bob know? And I'll go through the points. How did he know about the test flights out of Papoose Lake, which is not even Area 51? How did he know there was a site port, which George verified right after because the base told him, yes, there is, but I can't tell you anything about it, it's top secret. How did Bob know 100 things? I could do that, and I could probably convince you if that's what you want. I don't want that. I want you to come to your own conclusions based upon your own curiosity. So that's a long answer to your short question, but
By the way, I did interview the other people who were out with Bob on those tests. So when he went out and videotaped the one flight, and we showed it on the air. And the other people who made each of the 3 trips out in the desert, we did interview originally.
and they don't all get along or agree anymore, but they agree on one thing, which is Bob told the truth, and he took us out and we saw flying saucers.
Go ahead.
First, I mean, first.
Thank you.
Now, my question is, all the aliens hold, all the tests have causes. You are highly trained scientists. Okay. First thing for scientists, authenticate evidence. Pragmatic evidence. You knew you were going to one day want to go see what is there and make a point of it. And I even with the sun, come up with one spot. Evidence is the same levels that the on earth, different levels that you don't have, metal files, picture, something authentic. That's the first thing that a scientist do, is to get something concrete, evidence. And I know you have an answer for that. I don't
Right.
have one here.
Well, you're going with the right. You're making a sure. First of all, you're making the wrong conclusion. When I was working with the project, I had no intention of releasing this to the public. I was absolutely going with the program, but at the time, I didn't tell my closest friends, I didn't tell my wife even where I was going at that time. So I was playing along. In fact, when I was given the information and I was really into it in the early days there, you feel kind of privileged and say, you know what, everyone else doesn't need to know. I mean, we're the cool guys that get to know it. So I was with the program. It was only as time went on, it began to hurt me. And, when a problem began to arise with my clearance, and there began to be a question on whether or not, I should continue working there, that's the only time it began to enter my mind about telling this to anybody. As far as obtaining something from I'll tell you, it's very difficult to get anything in and out of a secure location like that. It would be virtually impossible.
Well, the movie strongly insinuates at least that element 115 made it out in some fashion. You want to address that?
Well, the element 115 was machined off-site at Los Alamos. And, you know, that's about all I'll say about that.
Jeremy, you did not use the encrypted interview, right? That's what we sped through, fast forward, that was all garbled. Was that about 115?
That was for us.
Right.
It wasn't even going to go to the film. The only reason I put that little garbled kind of fast part of the film was because the raid happened, and I wanted to show people, I needed to show people the impetus for that raid, and that was very clear. So, no, that's encrypted information, and it's taken care of, and that's because it needed to be said. You know, thank you for, you know, anyway. It isn't clear. Bob said it in 1989. He got a piece of element 115 out of Los Alamos where they machined it. He said he did a cloud chamber test. George was one of the many people that were there and saw the test. Element 115 is, as Bob describes and understands it, Ben's light. They saw that, but it was a story to me. They told me that. And then they told me they filmed it, but they can't find the film. And it was like they took this digging through his stuff, and Bob said, finally find this one little chunk. They did the test. He believed it was element 115 with the properties he described. His friends all saw it. They have the properties he described. Now, they're not looking to prove that to anybody. That's the one thing I think that was the most sensitive that Bob told me from the very beginning, and I get it why. So, all that is documented, it's encrypted, but you got a sneak little peek there because there was a freaking raid. And you needed to know why, because that was going to be part of the movie.
And that's the conversation that the agents repeated the next day? Okay. Who's got just a couple more here, guys? I know there's a million people who want to talk. Go ahead.
I'm Emily Lindsay. I just got back from South America and Antarctica. I've been a long time listener for this point band. I really love you guys and listen to your interview with KLAS. And I was a grad last night. We did some research in Antarctica to find evidence of UFOs perhaps buried under the ice, according to some of his evidence. Well, there was UFO sighting, but we don't know. We went to 6 different research bases, and we did not hear any corroborating evidence of it. Next week, I'll be in Nebraska, hometown Las Vegas, Nevada, for 5 events, and I'll be on a panel about the secret space program. What I want to offer to that is regarding the black budget, the U.S. black budget, and billions of dollars missing from the Pentagon. And I'm wondering if you think that there's something going on with black budgets.
Actually, I wouldn't know much about that at all. I wouldn't. It's clear that the project was highly classified, but how it was paid for, and actually by what faction of the government, is really cloudy. My paycheck's at the Department of Naval Intelligence, and what would the Navy be doing analyzing flying saucers? Or is it done that way just because that's where there were funds to draw from? So I think that's such a convoluted mess of the chain from where the money comes from. It's just beyond what I know.
I just want to say, we are living in a world now where in December of 2017, through the New York Times, you were told that our government is currently studying the propulsion systems of UFOs, that they're observing them through ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It's a UFO program that your tax dollars are paying for through the Department of Defense that is admitted to you. It didn't end in 1969 with Project Blue Book. That was bullshit. You were lied to. So now we're living in a world where we know the United States government is highly interested in these unknowns from no government here on Earth. That made me look at Bob's story differently. And the guy who wrote most of that information was actually George Knapp. So we should ask George about that question of black budgets and UFOs in the modern day world. Yes.
Well, just in a nutshell, you have the perception that Washington leaks like a sieve, that secrets cannot be kept. Secrets are kept. Big secrets are kept. And this revelation from the New York Times, December 2017, is an example of it. There was a program going on for all those years, for at least 10, 12 years, right under our nose, billions and billions of dollars to study UFOs. And it didn't go public until a guy named Lou Elizondo left the government, hooked up with a guy named Tom DeLong, for whatever reason. They came forward and met with the New York Times and talked them into doing this story. And I think the New York Times is getting ready to do another story. And because of the Times' reputation, other journalism organizations also covered the issue. In the last 14, 15 months, there have been stories on CNN and multiple stories and interviews on Fox and Washington Post and other major news organizations. The media environment has changed, and I think it helps to give a sort of a fresh prism to look at the Bob Lazar story because of that.
Up here? Down here. One quick question. In your experience with this, was there a unique metallurgy to the structure of the spacecraft? Something that was different?
Each part of the program is compartmentalized. Everything works in what they call a buddy system. You really work with one other specialist, and what you work on is very specific. We didn't work on the metallurgy of the craft. There was a separate group that did that. We dealt with the power and propulsion system of the craft. There are people that handle every aspect of it. Now, as far as the metallurgy itself, initially I wasn't even allowed to touch the craft. The first time they showed it to me, I walked by with the guard and slid my hand on it, which I was reprimanded for immediately. But it felt cold like metal. That's about all I could say. But whether it was a type of metal or a ceramic, I couldn't tell you, and we had actually no information on that at all. One time I was allowed to look inside, and the only reason I was to see if the placement of the system that I was working on, had any importance. But there were no fasteners, there were no welds, there were no right angles anywhere. It's the analogy I've always given, as if the craft was carved out of wax and then allowed to melt a little bit. Everything had a radius of curvature on it. And, at the time, I couldn't imagine how anything like that could be fabricated. But these days, with 3D printers, I guess there's something along those lines that can print with whatever material that was, metal or ceramic, and assemble it layer by layer. But I know so little about the metallurgy of the craft itself.
Thank you.
Young woman.
It was a little over 50. Now, I don't know for sure. We determined this afterwards, but I think about 52.5 feet is the best guess.
Just to be clear, you never got to ride it.
Never got to ride it.
Who got that job?
I don't know. I did get to see it fly once in close-up range, but I don't know what was in it.
All right. How are we doing on time? Anybody know? We okay? A little bit? Short? Okay, let's hear from Jim.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I just want to thank Joy, Bob, Jeremy, and George for the Sugi. Thank you for blessing us with this information. My question tonight is for George, actually. I'm looking at George, based on your extensive studies at Skinwalker Ranch. Do you think the phenomenon that Bob worked on and witnessed is all correlated or similar to what you worked on at Skinwalker Ranch? Is there any correlation between the two?
So the question is whether Bob's account has any correlation to Skinwalker Ranch. And I'd say no. I mean, Skinwalker's its own bag of tricks. It's a Disneyland of the paranormal. It's every kind of weird paranormal supernatural phenomena you can imagine all in one place, and including flying saucers. It doesn't make any sense, and no one who's studied it, including the U.S. government, have been able to figure it out. And I've been going there for 20-some years, and I sure as heck don't know what it is. But thanks for the question. It's in Utah, the Uinta Basin, Utah. It's just a really weird place. Robert Bigelow, a billionaire from Las Vegas, created an organization called NIDS. And in the mid-1990s, he bought it. He had a team of scientists on there, and he kept the property for about 20 years. And they studied it, encountered all kinds of really strange phenomena. The phenomena go back at least 250 years, as long as humans have lived in that part of the West, and it continues to this day. The U.S. government funded a study. Bigelow created a company that I mentioned a moment ago. Jeremy mentioned about ATIP, the Pentagon's secret study of UFOs. A mother program called OSAP was created in 2007, 2008, and it continued for almost 4 years. And one of its, it used Skinwalker Ranch as a living lab. They had government scientists out there, and they encountered some really weird stuff, scared the hell out of them, but they still have no idea what did it.
All right, I promised these guys we wouldn't go too long because there was no bathroom break before the panel started. So, Jeremy, why don't you pick the last question out here after you say what you got to say?
I was just going to say, so George and I made a whole movie called Hunt for the Skinwalkers, one right before this that he rushed me and almost broke me trying to make. So that's out there for you to enjoy it. My last question I want to take is from me to Bob, because he loves this one. What is the absolute most important thing from your life experience that you want this just audience right here to know? Like, what is it? We showed a movie, we did all this. What is it you want people to know, just really simply?
Well, it's already been said in the movie. It's exactly like I said. It's just that at that time, in the late 80s, that the government was in possession of this technology that was off-world technology, and they were actively analyzing it, and I was part of that. That's the most important thing.
I really want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Especially Joy, who is doing her first question and answer session, hopefully of many, right? I know it was awkward sometimes and it's uncomfortable sometimes, but this is a fascinating subject. I loved your movie. It raises all kinds of questions in my mind. You can make your own decisions, but thank you all for participating in it and putting it together, especially letting us show it here at the Free Film Festival. So thank you very much.